She's simply not good enough, Emily. My studio has a reputation to maintain. I watched my sister-in-law, Amanda's perfectly manicured fingers drum against her mahogany desk as she delivered this verdict about my 12-year-old daughter, Sophie. The late afternoon sun streaming through her office window caught the diamond tennis bracelet I'd heard her bragging about, a small gift she'd bought herself with the studio's success. Sophie's been dancing here for 6 years, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. She practices more than any other student. You've seen her dedication. Amanda's lips curved into that condescending smile I'd grown to hate over the years. Dedication doesn't equal talent. The winter recital is our biggest event of the year. I can't have her mediocre performance bringing down the whole show. My hands clenched in my lap as I thought about Sophie, waiting in the car outside because Amanda had insisted this be an adults-only conversation. My daughter, who spent every spare moment practicing, who begged for extra lessons, who danced in our garage until midnight because she was determined to perfect her techniques. This isn't about talent, I said. This is about your ego. Amanda's smile vanished. Excuse me? Ever since Sophie won the regional junior solo competition last spring, the one where your daughter Lily placed third, you've been finding reasons to criticize her. That's ridiculous, Amanda snapped, but I caught the flash of anger in her eyes. Lily's setback was temporary. She was recovering from a sprained ankle. Everyone knows she's the more talented dancer. Of course. Lily, Amanda's pride and joy, who'd been handed leading roles since she could walk. Who never had to audition, never had to prove herself because her mother owned the studio. Sophie earned her spot in that competition. I continued. Just like she earned her place in this recital. You can't just kick her out 3 weeks before the show. Amanda stood up, smoothing her designer blazer. Actually, I can. My studio, my rules. Sophie's just not up to our standards. Perhaps you should look into some recreational dance classes at the community center. Something Walker speed. The dismissal in her voice made my blood boil. This wasn't just about a dance recital. This was about Amanda's need to ensure her daughter always came first, always shone brightest. She'd been this way since she married my brother Mark 5 years ago, constantly competing, constantly proving her family's superiority. Sophie's already memorized her solo, I argued. She's been rehearsing with the group for months. What am I supposed to tell her? Tell her life isn't fair, Amanda said with a shrug. Better she learn that now. Besides, this will free up the solo spot for someone more deserving. Like Lily, she didn't need to add. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You're making a mistake. No, Emily. The mistake was letting Sophie continue this long when she clearly doesn't have what it takes. I mean, really, look at her body type. She'll never have a dancer's build like Lily. That was it. I'd sat through years of Amanda's subtle digs, her backhanded compliments, her constant undermining of Sophie's confidence. But body-shaming my 12-year-old daughter, that crossed the line. We're done here, I said, my voice ice-cold. You'll have our withdrawal paperwork tomorrow. Amanda's eyes widened slightly. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to pull Sophie from the studio entirely. Don't be hasty. Sophie can still take regular classes. She's just not recital material. Save it. I cut her off. You've made your position clear, but remember this moment, Amanda. Remember exactly what you did and why. As I turned to leave, she called after me. She'll never make it as a dancer, Emily. You're only setting her up for disappointment. I closed the door on her words and walked through the studio's lobby, past the walls lined with photos of past performances. Sophie was in many of them, always in the back row, always in supporting roles, while Lily dominated the center spots. How had I not seen it sooner? Sophie looked up as I approached the car, her face hopeful. She pulled her long brown hair into her signature neat bun, wearing her favorite practice leotard. Ready to rehearse, as always. My heart clenched. What did Aunt Amanda say? Can I still do my solo? I took a deep breath, sliding into the driver's seat. No, honey. She doesn't think it's the right time. Sophie's face fell, but she quickly tried to hide it. Oh, okay, maybe next time. Actually, I said, starting the car, we're going to be leaving Amazing Grace Dance Studio. What? But Mom, all my friends are here, and the recital. I know, sweetheart, but sometimes we need to make hard choices. Trust me, this is for the best. As we drove home, Sophie fell silent, staring out the window. I could almost see her dreams crumbling, and it broke my heart. But I also knew my daughter. Beneath her quiet exterior was a determination that Amanda had completely underestimated. What my dear sister-in-law didn't know was that I'd already been in talks with Madame Dubois, a retired principal dancer who taught advanced students privately. I'd seen her watching Sophie at competitions, had noticed her thoughtful expression. Last week, she'd approached me about private lessons. "Your daughter has something special," she'd said. "Raw talent is common. Dedication like hers is rare." I glanced at Sophie in the rearview mirror, saw the tears she was trying to hide, and made a decision. Amanda thought she was crushing a young dancer's dreams. Instead, she was about to witness what happens when you push someone to prove you wrong. "How about we stop for ice cream?" I suggested. "I have something exciting to tell you about your dance future." Sophie met my eyes in the mirror, a spark of hope returning. She had no idea what was coming, but I did. In 3 months, the National Youth Dance Competition would show Amanda exactly what she'd thrown away. The first time Sophie walked into Madame Dubois' home studio, I saw something shift in her expression. Gone were the mirrors covered in motivational quotes about perfection and excellence that had dominated Amanda's studio. Instead, simple ballet bars lined the walls, and afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows onto the hardwood floors. Madame Dubois herself was nothing like Amanda. In her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat chignon, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. "So," she said, her French accent subtle but present, "you're the young dancer everyone underestimates." Sophie glanced at me nervously, but Madame Dubois continued, "Good. Being underestimated is a gift. It means you can surprise people." Over the next few weeks, I watched my daughter transform. Under Madame Dubois' guidance, Sophie's dancing evolved from technically precise but cautious to something more powerful. She was no longer dancing to please Amanda or match Lily's style. She was finding her own voice. "Your daughter has fire," Madame Dubois told me one afternoon as Sophie practiced. "At your sister-in-law's studio, they tried to contain it. Here, we let it burn." The changes weren't just in her dancing. Sophie's confidence grew. She stood taller, smiled more often. The constant anxiety about measuring up to Lily's standards melted away. Of course, Amanda couldn't resist trying to check up on us. She sent my brother Mark to casually ask about Sophie's dancing during family dinner. "I heard she's taking lessons from some retired dancer," Amanda interjected, picking at her salad. How quaint, though I suppose it's better than nothing. I caught the familiar smirk playing at her lips, the one that said she was still certain she'd won. Let her think that, I decided. She'd find out soon enough. "Sophie seems happy," Mark offered, earning a sharp glance from his wife. "Happiness doesn't win competitions," Amanda replied. "Just look at Lily's trophy collection. That comes from proper training at a real studio." I bit back a response, remembering Madame Dubois' words. "Let your dancing do the talking." The National Youth Dance Competition was approaching fast. Sophie and Madame Dubois had crafted a contemporary solo that showcased everything Amanda had tried to suppress. Sophie's natural power, her emotional depth, her unique style. "This isn't just about winning," Madame Dubois reminded Sophie during their final rehearsal. "This is about showing the world who you truly are as a dancer." 2 days before the competition, I received a text from Amanda. "Heard Sophie's competing at nationals. How brave of her to put herself out there. Lily's solo is already generating buzz among the judges. Hope Sophie doesn't feel too disappointed when she sees what real talent looks like." I showed the message to Madame Dubois, who merely raised an eyebrow. "Your sister-in-law lacks class," she said simply. "But more importantly, she lacks vision. She sees dance as a trophy to be won, not an art to be lived." The morning of the competition, we arrived at the convention center to find it buzzing with activity. Dancers from across the country warmed up in every available space, their sequined costumes catching alight. We spotted Amanda and Lily near the registration desk, surrounded by their usual entourage of studio parents. Amanda's face tightened when she saw us, but she quickly masked it with a bright smile. "Sophie, what a surprise to see you here." She air-kissed my cheek. "And you must be her new teacher." Madame Dubois gave a slight nod. "Indeed, and you are the one who let this talented young dancer slip away. How unfortunate for you." Amanda's smile faltered. Before she could respond, the announcer called for junior solo competitors to prepare. "Break a leg, Sophie," Lily said, but the words carried the same condescending tone her mother had perfected. "Try not to be too nervous when you see my new turning sequence." Sophie just smiled. "Good luck, Lily. Dance your best." As we headed to the dressing room, I heard Amanda stage whisper to another mother, "Can you believe they're actually going through with this? It's almost cruel, letting her embarrass herself at this level." Sophie squeezed my hand. "It's okay, Mom. I'm not dancing for them anymore." Watching from the wings, I held my breath as Sophie took the stage. The opening notes of her music filled the auditorium. Not the typical competition piece, but a haunting melody Madame Dubois had discovered. From the first movement, I knew something special was happening. Sophie wasn't just performing her choreography. She was telling her story. Every leap, every turn spoke of resilience, of breaking free, of finding strength in being different. The audience fell completely silent. Even the judges leaned forward in their seats. When Sophie struck her final pose, there was a moment of absolute stillness before the auditorium erupted in applause. I caught a glimpse of Amanda's face in the crowd, her expression a mix of shock and dismay. Lily performed next, her routine filled with impressive technical tricks and flashy movements. It was exactly what the old Sophie had tried to emulate, but now it felt hollow somehow, lacking the emotional depth we just witnessed. As we waited for the results, Madame Dubois kept Sophie focused with warm-up exercises, ignoring the whispers and stares from Amanda's studio crowd. "Remember," she told Sophie, "whatever happens, you've already won. You found your truth as a dancer. That's worth more than any medal." But as the scores were about to be announced, I couldn't help noticing how Amanda had positioned herself near the podium, ready to celebrate what she clearly assumed would be another victory for her studio. The announcer cleared his throat, and I reached for Sophie's hand. What happened next would change everything, not just for Sophie and Amanda, but for everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough to follow their dreams. In third place, the announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium. From Elite Dance Academy, Madison Chen. Amanda shifted impatiently, her hand already on Lily's shoulder. She positioned them perfectly for the cameras, ready for what she clearly assumed would be another first-place victory. In second place, there was a pause that felt like eternity. From Amazing Grace Dance Studio, Lily Matthews. The confident smile froze on Amanda's face. Lily's shoulders slumped slightly before she caught herself, remembering her mother's constant lectures about maintaining proper appearance. "And your junior solo division champion with the highest score we've seen in this age group in over a decade." I felt Sophie's hand tighten in mine. From Independent Study under Madame Dubois, Sophie Harrison. The auditorium erupted in applause. Madame Dubois gave a small, satisfied nod, while I fought back tears of pride. But it was Amanda's reaction that caught everyone's attention. "This is impossible," she exclaimed, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "There must be some mistake. I demand to see the judges' scores." Sophie was already walking toward the podium when Amanda grabbed my arm. "What did you do?" she hissed. "Who did you bribe?" There's no way she could have beaten Lily fairly. Madame Dubois stepped between us, her voice carrying just enough for the surrounding crowd to hear. "The only unfair thing here, Madame, is how long you suppressed that child's talent. Now, if you'll excuse us, your scene is preventing your niece from receiving her award." Red-faced, Amanda watched as Sophie accepted her trophy and gold medal. The head judge was explaining something about extraordinary artistic expression and emotional maturity beyond her years. But Amanda had already turned away, practically dragging a tearful Lily toward the exit. Later, during the reception, dance teachers and studio owners kept approaching us. Many had questions about Sophie's training, impressed by how her style had evolved. A few even quietly mentioned their own experiences with Amanda's studio politics. "Mom," Sophie called out, rushing over with her phone. "Look at this." She showed me a social media post from the competition's official account. They had shared a clip of her performance, and it was already going viral in the dance community. The comments were flooding in. "This is what real artistry looks like. Who is this amazing young dancer?" Finally, something authentic in competition dance. That's when my brother Mark approached, looking uncomfortable. "Emily, can we talk?" He led me to a quiet corner. "I had no idea," he said softly, "about any of it. The way Amanda treated Sophie, how she..." I've been watching some of the studio practices lately. Really watching. It's not right. No, I agreed. It's not. I've enrolled Lily in therapy, he continued. The pressure Amanda puts on her, it's affecting her badly. And after seeing Sophie dance today, how happy she looks. He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. I'm making some changes at home. Big ones. I squeezed his hand, understanding what he wasn't saying. Across the room, I spotted Amanda making one last desperate attempt to salvage her reputation, telling anyone who would listen about how she'd discovered Sophie's talent, how she'd always known she was special. But it was too late. The truth had danced its way into the spotlight. That evening, as Sophie carefully placed her trophy on her desk, she turned to me with thoughtful eyes. Mom, I'm glad Aunt Amanda kicked me out of her studio. You are? She nodded. If she hadn't, I might never have found out who I really am as a dancer, or met Madame Dubois, or learned that sometimes the bad things people do to us lead us somewhere better. I hugged her, marveling at her wisdom. When did you get so smart? Probably around the same time I learned that being good enough for someone else isn't as important as being right for yourself. The next day, Sophie received an invitation to join an elite summer intensive program, one that Amanda had always bragged about Lily attending. But Sophie surprised me again. I think I'll stay here and keep training with Madame Dubois, she decided. She helps me remember why I love dancing in the first place. As I watched her head to the studio that afternoon, I thought about Amanda's words from 3 months ago. She'll never make it as a dancer. Sometimes the best response to people who underestimate you isn't to prove them wrong. It's to soar so far beyond their limited vision that they become irrelevant to your story entirely. Sophie had done exactly that, and her journey was just beginning.